Hey guys, welcome back to the internet. So a lot of you guys lately have been commenting that a lot of these stories sound completely made up, but just imagine if the internet was real. I mean, I know a lot of these stories sound pretty far-fetched, and maybe some of them were just exaggerated a little bit, or just completely pulled out of thin air, but as long as they're entertaining, I don't really care either way. But since we're on the topic of stories that didn't actually happen, let's look at some posts from r/thathappened. Starting with, a fellow Redditor wouldn't lie. So in high school, I was the most popular kid, and there I was, a huge stoner. Anyways, I was in the back of class, and I smoked probably class to an ounce and was blowing it out the window, until the teacher noticed smoking, smelling, and he came to me right as I was hitting my joint. And I held it in, and he kept an eye on me the rest of the class. I held my breath for 9 minutes straight, and the second he looked away, I blew it out the window. The cute girl sitting next to me was so impressed, she asked to smoke with me, so I took her home and we smoked and then had sex. I pounded her for like 3 hours, and she came at least 20 times. Man, high school was awesome for me. Man, I think this guy was high while writing this post. You know, people always like to talk themselves up to make themselves sound cooler. Just like this next guy. So I was at a restaurant and I said, "I'm not very hungry, I just want something easy." The server says, "Maybe the chicken strips for $6? I say, "Maybe it does, but that doesn't help with my hunger." The random dad from across the restaurant yells, "Good one." Man, see the problem with ones like this, it's like, all you had to do was just not type out that last line, and you could have just made a funny joke out of it, but you just had to say that some random person cheered you on. This is why so many of these stories end with, "and then everyone clapped." When you end a story with, "and then everyone clapped," it's become such a meme because it just sounds so unrealistic. You know, in the spirit of my channel, maybe one day if I ever start to make merch, I'll make a cool looking shirt that says, "and then everyone clapped." But let's get into the first story from Imagine the Internet, called Got Board Member Fired by Quitting My Job. So for a backstory, I started volunteering about 11 years ago in a local shop. I've always been the youngest employee there, although I came in with over 3 years experience from another location, and at 22 years old. My coworkers were all like 50 years old and up. Because it's a small shop, there were only 2 people working a 4-hour shift. 1 couple for opening and 1 for closing. Everyone had this regular shift. The only coworkers you would communicate regularly with are the ones you shared your shift with, and the ones during the shift change. The others you would occasionally meet during semi-annual staff meetings, or when one filled in for one of your coworkers when he was on holiday. All of the employees are monitored by a board, consisting of 4 to 5 members. These board members would come in at random to do extra work. So about 3 years after I started, Karen started to work in the shop. Since we had different working days, and staff meetings were always scheduled at times when I was working my other jobs, it took about 2 years for us to meet. We started to interact after ex-board member announced that she would quit. Karen expressed herself happy to take over some of the board members' tasks. Namely, all of the tasks that had something or other to do with store managing. Since she had her own website in the past, she was a hard worker. Everyone was excited. She would often drop by the store to chat, do some brainstorming, be available for questions. Since I was sharing my shift with the board member, she would drop by more often to brainstorm her ideas that had come up during the board meetings, to do inventory and whatever. So both of them often asked me to work out spreadsheets and such if the store was quiet. Because I was more fluent on that department, I gladly did that, since otherwise I'd be bored out of my skull over half the time. So during the long chats we had, Karen would start to increasingly complain about her life, her family, other coworkers, her illnesses, and how the walls started to close in around her. In her rants, she would often state that she was incredibly insecure, which will become obviously true later, that others were taking advantage of her. As a nice person, I tried to give relentless advice on every complaint Karen had, from medical to rational to everything. If it was on something I was not familiar with, I would read up on it during the week, and I would come back to it the next week. I felt it was important to let her know that there were still people she could count on. Over the years, Karen's insecurities grew, which made her more and more controlling. In her first year as a store manager, you could share your ideas on the store, and that would seriously be taken into account. The more ideas people presented, some good, some bad, the more Karen resented anything other than her own ideas, and expressed the fact that she was the store manager, so only her opinion counted. At the same time, she would ask the rest of us for our opinions on her changes in the shop. So B would often ask me to prepare something if Karen announced a change in the store that day, or Karen would ask through B if I could make suggestions if she didn't have much time. I always complied. This went on until a year ago. Karen had become so controlling that people had quit. She had asked me to take on a middle management position, but restricted me so much I couldn't do anything which this position would entail. About 2 months after I got this new position, Karen sent me a text in which she asked me to tell on B and my coworker to her. Her insecurities told her that B and coworker were conspiring against her and lying to her about it. Karen kept on and on about this, and all the crap she had pulled on me during the years. I called it quits. I left then and there. I kept in touch with B, and occasionally coworker, so the next part I just heard. After I made it public, Karen was the sole reason I left. More and more people threatened to do the same. The entire board exploded, and a mediator was brought in to see if there was any ground for a truce. The mediator concluded that there wasn't, and Karen had grown into a cancer. Karen was forced to quit out of her free will, or be let go. She chose to quit. After she left, B contacted me and begged me to return to the middle management position I was offered previously, including the power to do things as I would see fit. I agreed, and was always welcomed back like a hero. Although, Karen didn't leave quietly. She kept accusing different coworkers of being lying scum whose sole purpose it was to take her down. One by one, people kept on blocking her phone number and her email address. Next to that, people kept ignoring her if and when they met her on the street. Since Karen is gone, everything is more peaceful and everyone is working happier. Man, I know this feeling all too well. I swear, there's been so many jobs I've gotten where my boss or like a coworker or a manager or whatever is like an older woman, maybe like 50s or 60s, fairly skinny, smokes a lot, and incredibly micromanaging, which always drives me crazy. Well, one of them, back when I used to work a security job, so we would have like 5 or 6 people just sitting in a room, all just watching security cameras and doing such. But of course we would all be like stuck in the same room together for about 10 or 12 hours straight. And you know, we would get to know each other, we would all talk all night. I mean, everyone was seated very close to each other, so you would hear everyone else's conversations, so you really had to deal with people. And my one Karen manager or boss, I mean, I don't think she had any real authority. She was just kind of like in charge of the group at the time. She would just always look for reasons to argue with people or one-up people or just generally try and control everything. So part of the security thing was that we'd have microphones and we would yell at people who we could see on the cameras. And the one incident that sticks out in my mind the most, we were watching this apartment complex, and we're supposed to look out for like any shady behavior, anyone like trying to break into people's cars or stuff like that. And this one apartment complex had a dog park. So this Karen, she gets on the microphone, she's like yelling at them like, hey, move along, you know, you need to get out of here, it's late at night. And they didn't move, they're just hanging out in the dog park. So she calls the police. It was like a non-emergency line that we always used. I still remember her calling the police. This is what she said. Hello, yes, so there's some people in the doggy park without a dog. And the rest of the room is just cracking up, like trying not to laugh out loud at her. Cause like that's how crazy she was. So let's move on to some tales from retail called Lady Tries to Return Something Without the Receipt. Or the product. So I worked a holiday season at a store that sold calendars and very little else. Things were pretty straightforward and simple most of the time, until she came in. She came up to the register and told me that the calendar she had sent her mother on the other side of the country had 2 Aprils and no May. I said, oh, our apologies, that is a manufacturer defect that happens sometimes. I can exchange it for another one, or give you a refund. Do you have your receipt? She says, no. I said, no problem, I can still exchange it. She says, well, I sent the calendar to my mother in a city on the other side of the country. I said, no problem, she can just take it back to a calendar store in her city. Let them know the situation, and they can exchange it for her. She said, no, I want a refund for the defective calendar you sold me. I said, unfortunately, without the receipt or the calendar, I can't give you a refund. Now, like I said, if your mother can take it to a store in her city... No, I will not ask her to do that. It was a gift. You will refund my money. She proceeds to take her bank statements out and angrily points at the transaction. I say, I'm very sorry, ma'am, but I can't do a refund based on your bank statement. She continues to yell and scream and make a scene for a good 5 to 10 minutes. And though I don't remember the details, it was mostly about the age-old adage, the customer is always right, and you will give me my refund. Meanwhile, a line starts to form behind her at our only till. My manager was on her break when this started, but came to help me as soon as she came back. She told this woman the same thing, and asked for her to leave. The crazy woman finally leaves, but proceeds to yell at the people in line behind her on her way out. They sell defective calendars, don't buy from them. Still boggles my mind a decade later. Man, I'm learning all sorts of crazy tactics from these types of people. I wonder if this idea would work on bigger items. Maybe I could go into a car dealership and just be like, hey, so I bought a car from you, but it got stolen, so I'd like another one. Who knows, it might work. Well, we don't get many stories from Let's Not Meet, so this one is why I no longer stop at rest stops. So I was 18 years old and on my way home to California on summer break after my sophomore year of college. I had a 9-hour car ride ahead of me and stocked up on energy drinks, soda, and snacks for the ride home. I left school late after dinner with friends and planned on driving into the night. I'm making good time and I'm around 3 or so hours from home, which was Yuba City at the time. I'm an hour outside Reno and on a lonely stretch of road when it happened. I suddenly get the urge to pee. Those energy drinks I chugged coming back to haunt me, and I kicked myself in the butt for not stopping when I had gassed up 45 minutes before. I saw a sign that advertised a rest stop coming up, and so I drove the few miles to a sign and then pulled in. Parked in the parking lot was a ratchet-looking sedan, and on the other side was a lot Sprinter-type van. I quickly got out and hurriedly jogged to the restroom before I peed myself. I was flushing when I heard someone enter, and I froze. I'm in decent physical shape, and I work out quite often, but for a guy I'm on the smaller side. I'm only 5'7" and about 160 pounds, so I'm bracing myself for some Michael Myers type thing when I open the door and see an average Joe looking guy. He looked up and gave me a friendly smile, then stepped over to the urinal. I washed my hands and was getting ready to leave when he started talking. His voice was gravely and low, so I couldn't hear him the first time. "You like dogs, man?" he asked as he was washing his hands. He was wearing those coveralls mechanics wear and he had grease stains on it. My creeper meter started beeping. I shot him a friendly smile and said to him as I left the bathroom, "Yeah, man, dogs are cool." Well, that was the wrong thing to say because he comes following me out the door almost on my heels. "I got a new puppy, wanna see him? He's real cute." Now I'm freaking out. The keys are on one hand and my cell phone on the other. I called back to him in a shaky voice. "No thanks, gotta get going." I'm getting into my car when he grabs the door trying to open it wider. The dude was strong and he's a good few inches smaller than me. I start my car and put my phone to my ear, and what he said next caused me to almost crap my pants. "Time the cops get here, you'll already be dead." With that, I kicked out at his stomach, and thank goodness it connected. He let go of the door and fell on his butt. I then locked the doors and screeched the F out of that rest stop. I saw him scramble for his car, but I didn't stay around to watch. I took off like a bat out of hell. I was a nervous wreck for the next 3 hours, thinking he was going to follow me home and finish me off. When I got home, I told my dad, who had stayed up to wait for me, what happened, but he talked me out of calling the authorities. I made sure to take an entire different route when I went back to school in the fall, and because of that, I've never stopped at another rest stop ever again. So dude, wherever you are, I do not want to see your damned puppy. Man, I think I've been around this area that he's talking about. A couple years ago, me and my family were driving through Reno in the middle of the night and had to stop to get gas or something. It was like 3 a.m. and there were like a few guys just standing around like trying to sell us drugs or something. I don't know, it was creepy. And now for one more story for today is, insist I'm in the wrong seat and refuse to move? I can play that game. So I don't travel very often. It's even more uncommon for me to fly. Therefore, when I do fly, I always like to get a window seat. So last week, when I was boarding my flight, I was frustrated when I came to my seat and this lady was in my seat. She and her friend were sitting in the window in the middle seat while the aisle seat was open. Thinking she was just confused, I asked her, "Hey ma'am, I'm sorry, but I think you're in my seat." "This is my seat, kid. You're reading it wrong." I'm in my early 20s and definitely have a baby face. I'm kind of mad now and I go to show her my boarding pass. "Actually, I have my ticket right here and it says..." She interrupts me. "I do this way more than you do, kid. Sit down in your seat there." I am livid, but I don't want to hold the whole plane up, so I quietly sit down and simmer. While I'm sitting there, I overhear she and her friend mention how tight their connecting flight is in DFW, and how they're worried they won't get off the plane quick enough. Checkmate, you seat-jacking beep. So I sit back and enjoy the flight. Anytime I want to look out the window, I careen over their laps in a way that is super uncomfortable for everyone because I will be getting the view I paid for, thank you very much. Then, when we land, I get my petty revenge. I take my sweet time getting my bag out from under my seat, stand up slowly and stretch, and insist that the 2 rows behind us go before I do, seeing as the 2 worst players of aviation musical chairs in the nation can't get out till I do. I walk slow down the aisle and shake both flight attendants' hands on my way out. The girls ran out of there as soon as we rounded the corner. I felt great. Well, if they were in such a hurry, they should have gotten more accessible seats. Okay, let's move on to the question of the day, which is, what's the craziest thing a teacher did when you were in school? They gave a kid detention for putting on a stupid voice. He was Dutch, and he just had an accent. Well, maybe he should learn to speak in a different accent then. I was given detention for 5 minutes once. It was specifically so I could miss the bus and have to walk home. I lived 4 miles away from school, and my mom had to pick me up. The teacher didn't like that. She wanted me to walk home. Man, that's pretty messed up from a teacher. I had like the opposite once in elementary school. One time I missed the bus when I was like a little kid, and my teacher actually drove me home. I gave her directions on where my house was. Thinking about that now just seems so strange. I don't think anything even remotely close to that would be considered legal. She called us by numbers, not our names. Huh. Well, they did try that in Malcolm in the Middle, and it ended up with the whole class having a mental breakdown. They took the train and left the rest of the class behind during a school trip abroad. What? See ya, you kids are on your own, I'm out of here. The 5th grade teacher's last day before retirement, a kid mouthed off to her and she backhanded him. Well, if it's your last day, you're thinking, I got time to teach one more lesson, I guess. Why are there no science teachers here? For shame. My science teacher, in succession, cleaned a workbench by lighting the gas coming out of the gas tap directly. The resulting fireball nearly set a student on fire. He launched a bin about 10 meters into the air with metal, sodium, and water. He froze the skin off of 2 of his fingers with a rapid endothermic reaction, and he blinded himself with touch powder and had to wear dark glasses to cover his burns for a week. Wow, I want to be in this guy's class. It sounds like fun. Well, that does it for all of the responses for today. We're getting pretty close to 10,000. I've still got something planned for once that happens, so go ahead and subscribe, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow.